welcome back for installment number 3 in our series here. I'm Steve, a parishioner and an administrative assistant to Father Courtney Krier, the pastor here at St. Joseph's, and welcome again, Father.
Well, thank you for this presentation.
Glad to have Father fit in because we live, of course, in an age of turmoil, and sometimes when you walk into the church, you have a sense that there's a stability that you don't see in a lot of the real world today. There's a thread of continuance that here's one last thing that you can really hold on to.
And it's something that's necessary to hold on to. I'm not sure if you've been to a Catholic church, but for a Catholic church itself, I know that with times changing, some of them have perhaps lost their sense of what they are. But for us, when you walk into a Catholic church, it's quiet. There's peace. There's tranquility. There's goodness. There's love. There's truth. And the whole aspect is because when we come into the Catholic Church, and the idea is that we have an experience with God. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is God? And God, again, as we think of as being truth, goodness, peace, beauty, then we need to experience that. And so that's the concept of coming into the church
today. Yes. And what we want to get into is this idea of we can't know that a God really exists. In my own mind, my own juvenile way of thinking is that perhaps we think about God in the wrong sense, of he has to be something that we can really wrap our head around and understand, in the sense that we tend to be of a science. We are of a scientific age where we're led by the senses, and if we can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, or whatever the last one is, then it must not exist. But I think in a lot of ways God defies the ability of man to see through that veil of
he does.
Belief versus proof versus faith. And is it a requirement of believing in God that you cannot actually know for certain? So you need to have that unquestioning faith element, like Thomas the Apostle. Blessed are those who have not seen yet believe. So weigh on this idea of how we know that God exists.
Well, and that's a good question, and it's there, but you know, when you really look at that of ourselves, we know God exists. We might not like the reality of that. It's like children. You know, you think of children, and it's like, if my mother and my father love me, they should be making me happy. I should be happy. And yet we realize how unhappy sometimes we are, especially when they tell us to, again, perform a chore. But we realize that even though we might say they don't love us, they're still our parents. And we know that. And we can't just say because they don't give us what we want, what we expect from them, that somehow they cease to be our parents. Rather, again, it's that aspect of, okay, what are parents? What are they there for? And if parents are there to raise us into mature, responsible adults, then therefore they have to, again, teach us to be responsible. To be responsible, we have the responsibilities. And therefore, to show, therefore, that we, again, are able to take on those responsibilities, we have to fulfill those responsibilities. And if we fail and they do not correct us, then definitely we find ourselves to continue in failure. And that would be obviously a neglect on their part to have us fail. And so even as we think about God, we have to realize that we're living in this world, this reality that is there. And even though sometimes we not like what, again, is there, we still have to hold on to those aspects that are in front of us, and that reality by which we live, and such as truth.
Well, you make a good point, because I think a lot of times in today's modern culture, we confuse caring with limiting, like you're inhibiting my freedom as a human when you tell me what to do. So we diminish that aspect. No, that's caring. That's caring for you in the long run, in the sense that you'll be better off for this correction of things. And I think one of the things I'd like to say is unlimited human freedom is the enemy of civilization. I mean, it's just it becomes corrupted after a while if you
It
don't
does.
have any guardrails.
It does. You can imagine if here you are, a 6 or 7 year old, and your dream is to be a doctor. And you realize that here it is, that's your whole dream, your whole life. And if you reach that dream, you are a doctor, and you see that here's this person who comes who seems to be in a dying state, and you again bring them back life. That fullness, that fulfillment is there, it's complete. But if you have a dream of being a doctor, but you don't do all the things that are necessary to finally achieve that of being a doctor, you never have that experience. You don't come to it. And so when you again have that aspect of the things that are around you that say, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to live, then that aspect is, it's not limiting your freedom. It's basically allowing you to fulfill and live that dream that you have, to fulfill that life that you again have, and that's the only way that you're going to achieve it. And so sometimes we miss that point. We think that freedom is being able to not do anything, and that aspect actually enslaves us, because it kind of like narrows out of our abilities to expand and to reach out and perform and do and accomplish the various things that are there that are achievable for us to again accomplish. So I can't see
direction or some type of guidance, then you could be all over the map and just never really have fulfilled anything in life. So let me approach it from a scientific perspective. And of course, one of the things that I believe is, just because we know something like gravity or how the Edison effect works, that electricity can move through a vacuum with electrons and things like that, even though we may know those things, we make that leap from understanding how they work to somehow putting in people's minds that because we know how gravity functions, people start to bridge that. They make that leap of faith that says, well, if we know how gravity works, then we also know gravity. But do we really? We don't. All these years later, we still don't know what gravity really is. Yes. But because we harness it, we make that leap of faith. And this is a strange thing in an atheism where we have just as much faith in science as believers in God have in the existence of God. We trust that science will bridge that gap and eventually reveal to us great mysteries like what is a thought and what is conscience and those type of things. Can you weigh in?
Well, I think it's the same thing, and it's both. Whether you look at faith, whether you look at that of science, you're both looking at that of a manifestation. How do we know what gravity is? How it manifests itself? We again look at that manifestation, we realize that after observing that a rock falls after we throw it in the air, we realize that there's that gravity. We realize that everything is pulled down. We learn that we again can measure. We can again say this is the center of measurement, and therefore the positive, the negative. But it's only because of the manifestations. And so again, we have to realize that when it comes even to our knowledge of God, we have to then look at that of the manifestations that are there. And again, for going back, as we've been just pointing out a few times, that manifestation is again our purpose, our life, and realizing again, how do we see that? We see that manifestation with that of the goodness that is there, with that of the love, with the things that we again desire, that there's something that is not physical. A child isn't going to be satisfied with just a mother putting $1 in its hand. It's going to be satisfied when that mother embraces the child, because the child again realizes that there's that manifestation of that love, and that's what it wants. And it's not, you can say there's a sensual aspect there, but it's not so much that as it is to know, I know my mother loves me, she cares about me, and that's something that's not physical. And so when we start looking at these manifestations that are there, faith is just that we don't see the material, but we recognize and we accept the reality that is the immaterial, that is the metaphysical aspect that is there. And if we were to deny that, then we would have to ask ourselves, why does a child want to know that its mother loves him?
there's something there. There's something within that needs that. It absolutely needs that. Let me ask you this about because people are going to hit hard in the comment section about science and things like that. I tell you it's coming because I know it is. And I'm saying, but in a lot of ways, science is very simple-minded, and it only asks questions that it reasonably expects it can get answers to. But when you look at science over the last 60 years, in particular particle physics, I don't know if you follow things like particle physics, we really have not really advanced beyond a standard set of particles. And we're in this area now where science is corrupting itself now, where you have, instead of theories leading experimentation, and then experimentation proves or disproves, you have situations now where they'll get data and then try to backfit a new theory onto that. You know, it's like reverse engineering findings to try. Have you noticed this sort of corruption trend, like that the article that was written in Nature magazine about the link between autism and vaccines and things like that? We're seeing more and more cases where scientists are they're fraudulent, and they're leading in their beliefs instead of the scientific.
Well, and that goes with Francis Bacon on to that point of him bringing out the idea that, like you said, trying to harness nature, to use nature for our benefit. But we realize that it has caused exploitation. And that aspect is that in the name of science, science becomes able to do whatever it desires in order to obtain its end. And yet at the same time, it doesn't even know if that end which is trying to obtain is something that's going to even be better for mankind or worse. Right. And therefore it ends up making the populace that of, so to say, guinea pigs. And I don't know if people are willing to see it that way, but to be experimented upon to see whether or not this is availability of, so to say, making progress in science.
Like they experimented with new math on us, yes. and that turned out to be a gigantic step backward for the implementation of mathematics, and we certainly see dismal tests.
And I don't think we've come out of it, because I don't think we've seen for the schools, other than a certain select group who've, so to say, bridged or basically circumvented that. Most of our children today have not been able to advance, and science or math has not, so to say, advanced in that of the schools. Rather, we see more students in both the university level as also the high school level, as also the grade school level, not on that standard that has been there, that was there before in regards to
science.
Math.
Our point is that science doesn't necessarily lead us into places that are going to benefit society as a whole. And I want you to think about this too, Father, and this point about, the cosmology and the universe and things like that people study about the origins of the universe. And only over a couple last year or two have they seen that they see other places in the universe where the forces of gravity do not seem to work the same as they do here. And in my mind, it's meaning that instead of being more understandable, the universe is being increasing. It's coming up in exponentially levels of complexity now. Yes. Well, for my part, I don't believe that's by accident. Myself, I believe that, and I don't know if you believe it or not, but I'm just saying this level of knowability that this science is always leading, and we always think we're going to get answers to it. I guess what I'm trying to get to is this faith element of science that's overtaken all of science. It's almost unquestioning faith that the longer we pursue something, we will definitely get an answer. And I think, if I tell them, what about God? Should I not pursue? I may never get an answer, but I can live a life, and I can understand that there's a guiding force there that I don't have to have scientifically proven to me on your basis, with your tools and your science, that God actually exists, right? I can have the same faith in God and theology that you can have in science, because you're making a leap of faith too, that you're going to understand all of these things.
Yeah, you are, and I think the failures may not be pointed out, but I think that if someone is to look at it, then you can ask yourself how many experimental trials have gone on and they have not succeeded. And nobody talks about that. They only
poured into
it to find it and that aspect of that cost. I when it comes to that, definitely the idea is we seem to value things, unfortunately, as to how the world says this has a value. And therefore, once we put a value on that, then we have to realize that then we start comparing other things according to that value. And I think that's one of the things that we've lost here in our own lives, our own personal lives. Instead of being happy and being who we are, and again, expanding our own self, we find ourselves actually trying to, again, find happiness in something that the world, again, tells us is going to making us happy. And of course it fails, but we never ourselves grow. We ourselves, again, don't live a happy life. We ourselves don't have that realization that money isn't going to give us health per se. It's not going to give us happiness per se.
You're not going to
it's not going to say, I'm a better person. And therefore also the experience of love that's there, that experience of joy that can be there, that so many, especially in today's world, again, are missing. I think of our children and our children who, again, don't have that basis of a family where, again, they can grow up free, knowing that there's two who again, brought them into this world and love them.
That's going to be our topic for the next discussion with Father Krier. I want to leave on one last note here when it comes to, in my mind, we've branched out into our belief and our faith and our hopes in a horizontal existence. In other words, in things of this world. And we expect things of this world to be able to lift us upward. And I don't know if you agree with me that only something greater than us has the ability to lift us up to be better than our fallen natures.
You're right, and that's that pointing up to heaven. It's Platonism, we know, and not necessarily because we want to follow Platonism in the aspect, but again, pointing to the eternal, which again lifts us up, as opposed to what we have with Francis Bacon in the world today, where we're always looking at the ground. We're always looking at the earth and seeing what the earth can give us. And of course, as you just said, how can I see the earth as something greater than I am? It doesn't think, it doesn't do anything. Again, if I were to look at it, I use the earth. And to use something is, again, to belittle something. And therefore, to respect something, to serve something, is always means that it's something higher than myself.
I think that's a good start today on what is a very topical topic. A lot of people are talking about that these days, especially as we face, as we'll be talking about the challenge of Christianity and the idea that this may be the first generation that has less ideas about what Christianity is than any that came before. And what are the implications for that on our society?
And it comes, again, I'm hoping that those who are listening will begin to ask them that simple question: why am I here? Why am I here? Am I here to be used? Or am I trying to find something? And is it possible that I, again, can find it here that's going to be lasting? Not just for a moment, but it's going to be lasting. And therefore, with that realization, and we think about that, and perhaps that's one of the things, because if I was to look at myself in the mirror, I'm seeing the one I have to be with always. And therefore, I have to again realize that, is this who I am, what I want to be? And if it's not, then what do I need to do in order to be the person that I want to live with?
There we go. So on that, we're going to wrap up the discussion number 3 here about God and the existence of God. And in our next discussion, as I mentioned, we're going to bring that down to earth in terms of practical Christianity and what we potentially lose in a society when we lose Christian values and virtues and lean maybe more towards vice and things like that. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell for all notifications and give a thumbs up if you have questions or comments down below, Father Krier will of course see these questions and comments, but we do want you to be a part of the channel, and if there is a topic that you're interested in hearing discussed and things like that, we have many in this series to go, and I want to thank Father Krier for taking time out of, he's a solo act down here at St. Joseph's in Las Vegas, but I also extend an invitation when you're visiting Las Vegas. Come down and say hi to Father Krier, attend the Latin Mass here, especially if you can do the 10 a.m. Sunday Latin Mass. It's what pulled me in. It's what really honestly turned my life around, is discovering this amazing little church down here. So do keep that in mind too. So Father, thank you very much, and look forward to our next discussion here.
Thank you again.
Would you like to leave a blessing with everyone?
Benedicite Domini Potentes, Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, super vos, et manet semper. Amen.
Thank you, Father.